You remember learning to ride a bike, right? And those training wheels, they didn't teach you how to pedal, but they gave you just enough stability to figure it all out without constantly falling over. And then, once you found your balance, they had to come off. Well, it turns out that's a perfect model for how we learn pretty much anything. So today, we're going to look at the architecture of learning itself and the training wheels we all need to build new skills.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to get inside the head of a beginner, to see why learning something new can feel so overwhelming. Then, we'll unpack the two essential tools for helping them out, guides and scaffolds. From there, we'll look at the hidden danger of relying on them for too long, the real art of knowing when to let go, and finally, how this whole process leads to true independence.
So let's start right there with that overwhelmed novice. Think back to the last time you tried something totally new. Maybe it was learning a bit of code or a really complicated recipe or trying to play an instrument. It can feel like pure chaos, right? Just a dozen different things to remember all at once. So what is actually happening inside our heads in that moment? Why does it feel like our brain is just short-circuiting? Well, it all comes down to a really important idea called cognitive load. This right here, this is the mental juggling act a beginner has to perform. Their working memory, you can think of it like the brain's little sticky note, is trying to hold on to all of this stuff at the exact same time. What's the goal? What are the steps? What's this new jargon? How do I format this? And, oh yeah, try not to mess up. It's a recipe for total overload. And that, right there, is the core of the problem. Our working memory just has a very limited capacity. So when we ask it to juggle all of that, something's got to give. This is exactly why we need those training wheels for the brain. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, to tackle this cognitive overload, we have two essential tools in our learning toolkit, guides and scaffolds. First up, let's talk about a guide. Think of a guide as an external map for the task. Its main job is just to help you remember the sequence of steps, the overall structure of what you need to do.
And you've definitely seen these before. We're talking about a simple checklist for reviewing your work, a mnemonic to remember a formula, or maybe process cards that lay out the stages of a science experiment. They all live outside the task itself, and they act as this handy reference.
Now let's talk about scaffolds. A scaffold is different. It's a support that is built directly into the task itself. Its purpose isn't just to remind you of the process. It's to actually reduce the difficulty of the task while you're in the middle of doing it. Think about sentence starters that get a paragraph going, or a graphic organizer that gives you these neat little boxes to fill in. See, these don't just tell you what to do. They do some of the heavy lifting for you, and that frees up your precious working memory to focus on the new skill. So here's the bottom line, the main difference. Guides help you remember the process, and they sit outside the task. Scaffolds reduce the task's difficulty, and they sit inside it. Both are incredibly useful, for sure, but they do slightly different jobs. Okay, but here's where our story takes a really interesting turn. These amazing tools that help us learn so much can, paradoxically, actually prevent us from learning if we're not careful. This is the danger of dependence. This quote just gets right to the heart of it. I mean, if you always have the checklist, you never actually have to remember the steps, do you? The support becomes a crutch. The goal is for that knowledge to live inside your head, not just on a piece of paper next to you. And this is probably the single most important rule to remember about all of this. Like those training wheels, guides, and scaffolds are designed from the very beginning to be temporary. Their entire purpose is to eventually become unnecessary. So that brings us to the art of fading. If these supports have to be removed, how do we do it effectively? How do we do it without the learner just crashing? Well, it has to be a deliberate, really thoughtful process. And here's what that process looks like. You start with full support, of course. Then you slowly reduce it. Maybe the checklist gets a little less detailed, but the critical step, the real moment of truth, is number 3. Actively putting the support away and trying from memory. That's the moment that leads to genuine, unsupported competence. And this is just so important to understand. Fading is not a passive thing. It doesn't just happen on its own. It's an intentional act. The teacher, the coach, or hey, even you as a self-learner, you have to make the conscious decision to take the training wheels off. Okay, so let's bring this all home now. What does this whole journey from being supported to becoming independent actually look like in practice?
This is where the theory gets real. And look at how simple but powerful these actions are. Just asking someone to turn a checklist face down forces them to rely on their own memory. Or maybe going from a full sentence starter to just a few keywords. You're gradually handing over that responsibility to the learner's brain, which is exactly where it belongs. And if you're ever observing a great teacher or a great coach, this is what you should be looking for. Can you spot the support they're using? Can you see how it's working? And most importantly, can you pinpoint that magic moment when it gets removed and the learner just keeps going on their own? That right there, that's the sign of mastery for both the learner and the teacher. So here it is, the main takeaway. And it's simple, but really profound. Guides and scaffolds are the architecture of learning. They provide the essential structure and they reduce that initial burden. But they must be designed to be dismantled, leaving behind a strong, independent learner who can now ride that bike all on their own. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. Whether you're a teacher, a manager, a parent, or maybe you're just learning something for yourself, what support system have you been relying on that might actually be holding you back? What training wheel in your world is now ready to be removed?